Good morning. I'm glad to worship with you all on this feast day of Pentecost, one of the major feasts of the church, and glad to welcome our newest members of the church here in baptism today, too. I want to acknowledge right from the start the obvious difference in our worship space this morning. We are really fortunate to have an excellent music program, as you know, a wonderful choir and musicians, and music is so important for our worship experience. For me, and I know for many of you, music here in this space opens up a dimension that is not otherwise present. To put it in the language of Pentecost, it's an experience of the Spirit moving. And that's so important for us. And back in 2015 and 2016, when we renovated this space and we were out of the church building for a while we did that, we designed a new organ for our church space. And we installed the majority of it back in the back of the building, now covered in plastic, back in 2016. And those pipes are wonderful, but they are also only part of the instrument that we envisioned. The original design called for pipes here at the front as well as at the back to balance the sound across the space so that we don't have to play too loudly in the back, so that we can hear it up here at the front. In 2022, your vestry approved the completion of the organ, and we engaged Laterno Organs, who built and designed the instrument for us, to build the rest of it, the remaining 35%. But it turns out it takes them a while to do that. So it's going to be 2027 when the pipes arrive. So what we are doing now is preparing the space back behind the ceiling here to receive the pipes. When you come back next week, these temporary walls are going to be all the way up to the ceiling to seal this off as the construction gets messy over the next few weeks. And then when you come back in mid-September, this will all be gone and nothing will look different, but the space will be ready for 2027. We really appreciate all of you who are helping to make this generational investment in the life of our community possible. You know, this is an instrument that folks will be playing and listening to and benefiting from, having their spirits lifted by, when all of us, every single one of us, is gone. That's the kind of investment we're making in our worship experience here. Thank you for making that possible. We're going to have a sermon too. But it seemed like there was an elephant in the room that we needed to address. One of the things that I hope for my kids, for me, for all of us, is a place where I experience acceptance and welcome and inclusion in the group, an experience of belonging. I hope that they and we experience a place where they and we can be ourselves and where we can be loved for exactly who we are, where we can experience feeling worthy of connection to other people, worthy of love. The times that have been the most difficult for me in my life are times when I didn't experience that kind of belonging and acceptance. It is among the things I hope the very most for all of us, for myself too. We read just now from the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible in our Hebrew Bible, our Old Testament. And we're reading from the first few chapters of the book today. Ancient stories of how the world came to be. Stories that people wrote down 2,600, 2,700 years ago because they helped explain reality to these people. People all spoke one language, the story goes, and lived in one place. And they got this idea that if they could build a giant enough tower without God's help, this kind of pride, this thinking that they could do this all by themselves, that they didn't really need anything beyond themselves, that they could build this giant tower and reach themselves up to God. So the story goes, God scattered the people across the world and caused them to speak many different languages to confuse them, to disrupt their connection to each other. Now let me say that this is not intended to describe a set of historical facts. This is an ancient story. The point here is that it's a description of the human condition. We find ourselves separated by distance, by language, by different culture, you name it. And this separation for us, it can be a source of confusion and difficulty. That's what this story is about. True 2,600 years ago, and true today. And now fast forward to our story that we also read today from the Acts of the Apostles in our New Testament. This book is a continuation of the Gospel of Luke. It is a story of the early followers of Jesus after his life and death and resurrection, a story of the early church. And this story today takes place as Jewish people from around the world have arrived in Jerusalem to celebrate the Jewish festival of Pentecost, a thanksgiving for the harvest and the gift of the covenant given to Moses on Mount Sinai. Pentecost recalled for the Jewish people back then the new kind of community, the new way of life that was opened for them after they left bondage in Egypt. And just an aside here, like many of our feasts and holidays, Pentecost for us is an import. We borrowed it from Judaism before us. I'm using the work here of theologian Marcus Borg. So back to the story we have in Acts. There are people from around the world in Jerusalem celebrating Jewish Pentecost, speaking different languages from different cultures. And the disciples are gathered together feeling defeated, feeling like their mission had ended with Jesus' death. And all of a sudden, a wind rushed into the room and fire descended upon them. And they began to speak in languages from around the world so that the crowd gathered outside heard them in their native language. And all these different languages, they remained different in our story, but the people could understand them all. The difference was still there, but the people could understand each other anyway. And Peter addressed the crowd, quoting from the prophet Joel, where God says, "I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh." The Spirit rekindling Jesus' mission. And this is the story of the birth of the church. And it tells us something important about who we are. That this is a place where we find God in everyone. A place where we seek connection to others, where we seek understanding across difference. That there's a divine presence, a holy presence underneath what we think separates us. And it serves to connect us all. It's God's Spirit in everyone. It's a kind of reversal of the ancient story of the Tower of Babel. That's why we're reading them together, paired together this morning. Jesus gives us access to connection, to love, the story says, across whatever differences we know. Theologian Borg writes, Pentecost is a reversal of Babel. What happened at Babel confused the world by dividing it into separate languages and countries, resulting in misunderstandings, rivalries, and conflict. Pentecost is the beginning of the reunification of humanity. When those early followers of Jesus, in the generations after his death, when they told their story of what they were all about, this is what they wrote down. When you have an experience of God, it makes human differences unimportant. When you have an experience of the Spirit, it makes all of those ways we think we are separate from each other real and imagined, all of those ways we think we're different. When you have an experience of the Spirit, it makes them all fall away. And we see this over and over, don't we, in the life of Jesus. It's one of the through lines in the stories we have about Jesus, that he breaks human boundaries. He hangs out with people who are sick and unclean. He's living in an occupied area, and he spends his time with the hated enemy collaborators. And he says to everybody he encounters, you are worthy of love and forgiveness and acceptance. And did you pick up on what Jesus says to his followers in today's gospel lesson from John? It's kind of astounding. These things that I've done, he says, these miracles, these signs of God's presence, all these things I've been up to, he says, this is my translation, you're going to do even greater things than these. It's kind of wild. His expectation for our new way of being, this new community that he inaugurates for us. And this is a comfort for us. We can never be separate from the love of God. That was Paul's experience of Christ's love and presence too. When it's us, when we're the ones on the outside, the ones feeling separate, experiencing shame, feeling unworthy of connection, unworthy of love, when that is you, then you will know the promise of Jesus that this new covenant, this new way of living, it extends to you, to everyone. And this is a challenge for us too, because this is how we're called to live our lives, to see the holy in everybody, to look for connection, to practice empathy, even across difference. And that's when it's hard. Sometimes it's the very hardest with the people closest to us, people in our families. And sometimes it's the very hardest with the people who are far away. That is the new community that Pentecost inaugurates in the church. It is the new way of being that Jesus calls us to. It is the Spirit poured upon us, poured upon everyone. Amen.